Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at State Senator Amanda Chase from the state of Virginia announcing that she will not run as an independent and is endorsing Glenn Youngkin. Now, this is a major development in the Virginia governor's race because many people thought that if Amanda Chase did run as an independent, that would be game over for the GOP. I was a part of that group of people because Amanda Chase is the Trumpiest out of the Republican candidates for the governor nomination that were running, and had she disappeared and moved out of the Republican Party and switched parties, you would have seen a lot of people crossing over party lines per se to vote for an independent like Amanda Chase. But she said today on the Richmond Morning News with John Reed, this has not been actually released in terms of news articles, so I actually found out through social media that this was released, and then I actually listened to the video. I'm not going to play it for you because it's not my content, but I am going to link it in the comment section down below so you can listen to it yourself. So for the sake of this, just understand that she is saying that she is not running as an independent and agrees that people from her coalition in the GOP should go over and support Glenn Youngkin, and says that she's already congratulated him on his election victory for the GOP nomination. So again, go ahead and look in the description box and in the comment section down below for this link if you want to watch it yourself. It's about a minute long. You're not really getting anything more than what I'm telling you now, but just in case you want to actually hear it yourself and hear her words rather than mine, go ahead and check it out. So, this governor's race, why is it so important? Why are we making a video about it? Well, first things first, this is actually going to be a competitive race. Virginia's governor election, while going to the Democrats in 2013 and 2017, might not end up the same way. Virginia does have a pretty strong history over the past 10 years of voting for Democrats. The last time a Republican governor was in office or was elected to office, because they were there in 2013, was in 2009. And that was immediately following Obama's election, and it was a landslide victory to today's standard for the GOP, something that you wouldn't exactly see today. So looking at our governor election, what are we expecting to see? What are we hoping that will happen? Well, I'm sure that, for personally speaking, I think that it'd be great if we had a competitive race, largely because I like covering competitive races. It's not really interesting if you know exactly who's going to win, and that's what we might be given. The GOP nomination process was a little bit different this year. The GOP in the state of Virginia, the statewide representatives, opted in for not a primary process, but for a convention process. So that means that people would have to drive up to conventions, and they would have to cast their ballots, and people would have to register to be convention delegates, rather than a traditional party primary process. And the reason why they did this was to actually kick out Amanda Chase out of this office, to prevent her from becoming the nominee, because if she was that Republican nominee, I can tell you now, this race would have been changed to safe Democrat that same day. So looking at the primary polling data, the GOP was worried in this state. In every single poll that had to do with primary polling, Amanda Chase won. In the only poll that had to do with convention polling, Glenn Youngkin won, and he ended up winning. It said the top two candidates would be Pete Snyder and Glenn Youngkin. Well, that's the exact thing that happened. Amanda Chase ended up being number 3, but as you can see in the primary election data, she was number 1, largely because she was the Trump candidate. She was the one who tried to embody President Trump and become the Virginia version. Her slogan was "Make Virginia Great Again." So Amanda Chase tapped into that subsection of the GOP that sometimes majority of the GOP in certain states and sometimes minority, but that Trump base that really adores President Trump, that will go with any candidate who seems to be similar to him in any fashion, and that was Amanda Chase. So instead of allowing the primary process to proceed, they opted in for a convention, and it worked out because Glenn Youngkin ended up that GOP nomination. So far, everything is going good for the Virginia GOP. But then they were halted a little bit by Amanda Chase. After it became evident that Glenn Youngkin was going to become the Republican nominee, she essentially said, if this steals the election for Pete, Pete, that's Pete Snyder. She didn't necessarily mention Glenn Youngkin, but it's essentially saying, if this election was stolen, if I felt it was illegitimate, I have plenty of time to run as an independent. And, she says that she cannot pledge, that the party cannot run a fair process. So it seemed as if, if Pete Snyder was that nominee, that she would have been upset. She would have ran as an independent. But since it was Glenn Youngkin, she has opted against running as an independent. But the fact is that there was this speculation, there was this idea that Amanda Chase might run as an independent, and now that she is squashing that rumor and saying, no, I will not run as an independent, things get a little bit trickier for Democrats. But like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I want to talk about why Democrats actually might be somewhat confident, though. Even though the Virginia GOP seems to be on top of things, the Democrats also have a pretty strong history that can sort of back up why they would be confident in this state. So I'm not going to show you 2012, but I am going to say in both 2008 and 2012, Barack Obama won the state. But in 2013, you're talking about the post-Obama re-election era, and Terry McAuliffe actually wins this governor's race, despite the Republican winning in the previous election 4 years prior by double digits. So Terry McAuliffe wins by 2.5%. in the state of Virginia. Fast forward to 2014, it gets a little bit closer. Republicans absolutely obliterate Democrats on the national map in the House, the governorships, and in the Senate, but Mark Warner, the Democratic incumbent, defeats Ed Gillespie by just around a percentage point, just a little bit under. Fast forward 2 years later, 2016 rolls around, and Hillary Clinton wins the state by 5 points. Go ahead and move into 2018. Well, 2017, Ralph Northam defeats Ed Gillespie, the 2014 failed Republican nominee for Senate, by around 8 points. 2018, Tim Kaine, the vice presidential nominee for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, wins by double digits in this Senate race. And then in 2020, Joe Biden wins the state by double digits, giving the largest margin of victory for a Democrat in Virginia since 1944 under President FDR. So Joe Biden had a very good election result in Virginia, a very good one that the Democratic Party, I'm sure, is very happy with, that they know they can roll over. They can lose a significant amount of support and still win in the state of Virginia. That's what's being told to them by these results in the presidential election result in 2020. But Amanda Chase running as a third party would have been a blessing. It would have been this gift from the Republican Party in Virginia that would have landed the Democratic Party potentially a landslide victory in the state. And if you think about it, it makes sense. For instance, let's say Amanda Chase takes away, just the smallest amount that she had. She had around 11% of support or 17% of support. Let's say, for instance, the GOP wins, 50% of the vote in the election? Well, that would be enough to win by a plurality, but if you're taking away 17% of 50, that's 8.5%. So the Democratic Party would win in that scenario, even with the GOP getting even the majority of the vote, just because she would be peeling away from the Republican Party. There would not be any Democrats that would have voted for Terry McAuliffe that would vote for Amanda Chase, or not just Terry McAuliffe. I mean, I'm not trying to decide the primary ahead of time, but he is the front runner, so that's why I mentioned his name. But looking at the Democratic nomination process, I think that there's still a few things that need to be sorted out. And I think that that third-party nomination thing would have screwed over the GOP in Virginia entirely. And now that it's out of the question, it makes it more easier for them to view Virginia as an actual state that they could win in 2021. But the governor's race is going to still be very contentious and still leaning towards the Democratic Party, but we don't know exactly who this nominee is going to be. There's a number of endorsements, a number of candidates running. You have 5 people in total. You have Justin Fairfax, the lieutenant governor of Virginia. You have Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of Virginia. You have Jennifer McClellan, someone who served in the state of Virginia, along with Jennifer Carroll Foy, along with Lee Carter. And Lee Carter, Jennifer Carroll Foy seem to be the more progressive ones. Jennifer McClellan a little bit. Justin Fairfax, Terry McAuliffe a little bit more on that centrist side. But the endorsements do matter, because endorsements do hold a lot of weight, especially in a local race. This is not some national election, but rather a local and governor election. Terry McAuliffe actually received the endorsement of Ralph Northam, the incumbent governor of Virginia. Now, I find that to be interesting because Justin Fairfax is the lieutenant governor of Virginia. So his own number 1 to his number 2 is endorsing Terry McAuliffe. And Terry McAuliffe is this recognizable name, which is why he's polling so high in the election data. So how would Terry McAuliffe actually face off against Glenn Youngkin? Well, Terry McAuliffe, like I said, would start out with the advantage. He's on track to win a primary. To be honest, some of these other candidates realistically do not have a chance. If you're looking at the date of the primary process, you're talking about it occurring potentially, I believe, in June. Yeah, June 8th, 2021. That's in just, right around the corner. You're talking about that being in 3 weeks from now. And the fact is, none of these other Democratic candidates, unfortunately for them, are polling above single digits. The last time was in February of 2021, and that was Justin Fairfax at 12%. Prior to that, it was January and then December. Terry McAuliffe is at 47%. Even if you combine all of the other support for the other candidates, the only thing it brings you to is to 22% with 31% undecided, which means that if Terry McAuliffe gets just 3.1% of that undecided total vote, you're going to be looking at Terry McAuliffe winning the primary. The fact is, one of these candidates would have to be this opposition to Terry McAuliffe that could bring in all of the other people who support other candidates, in addition to 95% of those in the undecided column, which just isn't realistic. Terry McAuliffe is absolutely on track to win this nomination process. As much as it does seem painful for many of these more progressive Democrats, at the end of the day, Virginia hasn't necessarily been a state too nice towards progressives. Bernie Sanders 2016, Bernie Sanders 2020, and other nomination processes where the centrist candidates almost always win. So Terry McAuliffe could be on the pathway to face off against Glenn Youngkin, and I honestly think it'll be very interesting. Now, the numbers being released so far, the rankings so far, the Cook Political Report tells us that it's a likely D race. That's how I have it. Inside elections, I agree with both of them. The Sabato's crystal ball from the University of Virginia put it as lean Democrat. So I can understand that if the race did get a little bit narrower, but as of right now, we're not really seeing that. You don't go from the Democratic Party winning in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 in the statewide elections, in the state Senate elections, state delegate elections, and then 2020 by double digits, and then argue that all of a sudden the Republicans had the advantage. As much as the GOP would want to be in the advantage point here, and even with this Amanda Chase not running as an independent, it doesn't really make it it doesn't really make it so the GOP has the advantage, but just makes it realistic. Before, if Amanda Chase actually was running as a third-party candidate, it would have been completely out of the question, 100% without a doubt. There would have been no question as to whether or not the Republicans could win, because the answer would be no 100% of the time. But since Amanda Chase is not running, now it's maybe 20% of the time instead of 0, which still isn't the best position that they would want to be in. But who are they to complain? I mean, the Virginia GOP pretty much screwed themselves over after the 2016 election. They could have done some type of damage control, but instead, they started nominating people that were full on for President Trump and gave a bad reputation to the statewide GOP, which is why they took a preemptive measure to prevent yet again another Trump-like candidate for running for United States office or governor of the state of Virginia. And 2018, I think, is also another example of why these Virginia GOP nominees shouldn't necessarily be 100% pro-Trump. Corey Stewart was very much that way. He actually was almost the nominee for Virginia governor back in 2017 and lost to Ed Gillespie. It was a race that was supposed to be close. We can actually see the election results because it does provide a little bit more context about what a Trump-like candidate could actually do in the state. And I don't think that Amanda Chase would have won by a majority, but I do think she would have gotten a pretty significant portion of the vote. She probably could have won by a plurality, the same way Ed Gillespie did. I mean, this margin of victory between Ed Gillespie and Corey Stewart was 1.2%. Corey Stewart went on later to run for Senate, but he was much more, I think, right-wing than Ed Gillespie, and looking at the results, it wasn't favorable. Tim Kaine won by 16 percentage points in the state of Virginia. That is not a normal margin. The fact Tim Kaine was able to win by 16 points is a testament to Tim Kaine's campaigning abilities and a testament to how bad the GOP nominee was for 2018. So that's what the GOP tried to avoid. But at the end of the day, they need to face the reality. While yes, it's possible that the GOP does actually win in Virginia for once, I will say, better chance than they did in 2017, it doesn't mean they are the favorites. Don't misconstrue my words for me trying to, argue one point or another. Terry McAuliffe will likely be this Democratic nominee. Terry McAuliffe is also one of the few people who could actually win in a Democratic incumbent year. What does that mean? It means there's a Democrat in the Oval Office, which could mean that, midterm elections and off elections would not necessarily be beneficial for Democrats. In 2013, Terry McAuliffe broke that streak. And that's what he's trying to argue now. Terry McAuliffe isn't necessarily the most awe-inspiring, most inspirational, new type of change, visionary candidate that you might be expecting out of a new type of Democratic Party, out of a more progressive Democratic Party following Joe Biden's election. But he is a return to normalcy. He is that comfortable and recognizable name that Virginia voters know so well that could result in him being elected again. Ralph Northam won by a majority. Terry McAuliffe did not. But you have to understand that the circumstances were different. At the end of the day, Terry McAuliffe did what was supposed to be undoable. He won after a Republican was elected back in 2009 and arguably a better year for Democrats in 2008. So when Terry McAuliffe won in 2013, it was defying expectations, and I think that while he won't defy expectations, he will match them in 2021. As much as the Republican Party has coalesced around Glenn Youngkin and went and bent over backwards to make sure that he was the Republican nominee, and making sure that Amanda Chase, through maybe pressure from President Trump, who has just endorsed Glenn Youngkin, or through others, Ted Cruz's endorsement, whoever it might be, there might be some pressure on Amanda Chase, but all of this is the GOP trying to do everything they can to ensure that they coalesce around Glenn Youngkin, but at the end of the day, they still need to face the fire, and the reality is that the Republican Party in Virginia is still not the majority party and does not have the advantage in this governor's race. But they might by the end of the year. Only time will tell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.